In the heart of a rugged wilderness, where the air was thick with the scent of pine and the ground was carpeted with fallen leaves, an injured wolf emerged from the shadows. Its fur was matted, its sides stained with blood, and its movements were slow and labored. The wolf's eyes, usually sharp and wild, now held a desperate plea, a silent cry for help. It was a sight that would have made even the most hardened soul pause. The wolf's journey had been long and fraught with danger, and now, it stood before a solitary man, its fate hanging in the balance. The man, a seasoned hiker named Jack, had spent years traversing the remote trails of the wilderness. He was no stranger to the harsh realities of nature, where survival was a daily struggle and every creature fought against the odds. But this encounter was different. The wolf, instead of fleeing or attacking, approached him with a quiet determination. It sat down, its head bowed, as if begging for mercy. Jack, though initially taken aback, felt a deep stirring within him. There was something in the wolf's eyes, a vulnerability that resonated with his own hidden fears and struggles. As Jack knelt beside the injured wolf, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with tension, as if the very trees were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Jack carefully examined the wolf's wound, a deep gash that pulsed with each labored breath. He knew that time was of the essence. With the few supplies he carried, he began to tend to the wolf's injuries, his hands steady despite the pounding of his heart. The wolf, though wary, allowed him to work, its pained whimpers gradually turning into soft sighs of relief. Hours passed, and as Jack continued to care for the wolf, he felt a strange connection forming between them. It was as if the wolf, in its moment of greatest need, had chosen him, trusting him to be its savior. Jack, who had always seen the wilderness as a place of indifference, now found himself questioning his beliefs. Perhaps there was more to nature than just survival. Perhaps there was a deeper, more compassionate side that he had never allowed himself to see. But just as the first signs of hope began to emerge, the situation took an unexpected turn. As Jack finished bandaging the wolf's wound, he noticed something unusual in the underbrush nearby. It was a small, weathered object, partially buried in the soft earth. Curious, he reached down and picked it up. It was a fragment of a broken necklace, the pendant cracked and worn, but still bearing the intricate engraving of a wild, soaring eagle. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He recognized the symbol from an old family heirloom he had seen in his childhood. What was it doing here, in the middle of the wilderness, near an injured wolf? The discovery sent a chill down Jack's spine. It hinted at a hidden narrative, a story that went far beyond the brutal realities of the wild. The wolf's injury, the pendant, the strange sense of connection he felt, it all pointed to something deeper, something more sinister. Jack knew that he couldn't ignore this. He had to uncover the truth, no matter where it led him. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Jack made a decision. He would not leave the wolf to fend for itself. He would stay with it, protect it, and find out what had caused its suffering. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The wilderness, once a place of solitude and indifference, had become a stage for a story of compassion, mystery, and the unbreakable bond between man and beast. The days that followed were a blur of tension and discovery. Jack and the wolf, whom he had come to call Spirit, formed an unlikely partnership. Spirit, though still weak and in pain, began to show small signs of trust. It would occasionally approach Jack, allowing him to tend to its wounds, its eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and caution. Jack, in turn, found himself growing more attached to the wolf with each passing day. He documented every detail in his worn leather journal, noting not only the physical progress of Spirit's healing but also the subtle changes in its behavior. But the mystery of the pendant continued to haunt him. He couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to Spirit's injury, that it was a clue to a larger, more complex story. Determined to uncover the truth, Jack began to retrace his steps, searching for any other signs that might shed light on what had happened. He found fresh claw marks on the bark of a nearby tree, deep and deliberate, as if someone had used a sharp tool to make them. The marks were too precise to be the work of a wild animal, and they sent a chill through Jack's spine. As he continued his search, Jack stumbled upon a small, secluded clearing. The ground was disturbed, as if someone had been digging there recently. His heart pounded as he knelt down to examine the area. There, partially buried beneath the leaves, he found another piece of the broken necklace. This time, it was a small charm, tarnished and worn, but still bearing the same eagle symbol. Jack's mind raced with possibilities. Was Spirit's injury the result of a random encounter with a predator, or had it been deliberately targeted by someone with a hidden agenda? The thought was both heartbreaking and enraging. Jack had always believed that the wilderness was a place where nature's laws reigned supreme, where survival was the only rule. But now, he was faced with the possibility that human cruelty had infiltrated this sacred space, leaving scars that went far beyond the physical. He knew that he couldn't let this go unanswered. He had to find out who was responsible and bring them to justice. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jack began to reach out to the local community. He shared his findings with the authorities, urging them to investigate the possibility of human interference. At first, they were skeptical, but as Jack presented the evidence, the pendant, the claw marks, the disturbed ground, they began to take him seriously. A local wildlife investigator, intrigued by the precise nature of the marks, agreed to accompany Jack back to the clearing for a more thorough examination. Together, they documented every detail, from the fresh claw marks in the soft earth to the position where the pendant had been found. As the investigation deepened, whispers began to circulate in the local community about a shadowy figure known to lurk in the fringes of the forest. A figure rumored to be involved in illegal activities, including the capture and exploitation of wildlife. Though these were mere whispers at first, the accumulating evidence gave credence to these claims. Jack's mission had evolved from one of compassion and rescue into a quest for justice. He realized that his journey with Spirit was no longer just about healing the wounds of one injured wolf. It was about exposing a network of cruelty and exploitation that threatened the very fabric of the wilderness. He vowed to follow the trail of evidence wherever it might lead, even if it meant confronting the dark underbelly of human greed and malice. The investigation into Spirit's injury and the mysterious clues began to converge into a critical turning point. What had started as a personal rescue mission had now escalated into a community-wide confrontation. The evidence Jack had painstakingly gathered, the deliberate claw marks, the torn pendant, the precise footprints, had raised questions that he could barely fathom. Every detail suggested that Spirit's suffering was not an unfortunate accident of nature, but rather the result of targeted human malice. The tension reached a palpable height during a specially convened community forum at the local town hall. The room was filled with local wildlife advocates, community leaders, and concerned citizens, all buzzing with conflicting voices. One impassioned activist, tears welling in her eyes, declared, "If we allow such cruelty to go unchecked, we not only lose a noble creature like Spirit, but we also sacrifice our collective humanity." Her plea was met with equal fervor by others who recounted similar incidents from the past, incidents that had long been swept under the rug by authorities unwilling to confront powerful interests. Yet not everyone in the forum was ready to embrace a purely emotional response. A contingent of pragmatic officials argued that while the evidence of deliberate injury was disturbing, it was critical that any action taken be based on solid empirical proof. "We must avoid letting our emotions override the facts," insisted one local council member. A rush to judgment without comprehensive evidence could lead to unintended consequences. This insistence on a measured approach clashed with the growing public outcry, intensifying the division between those who demanded immediate retribution and those who called for a systematic investigation. Amid these heated debates, an anonymous tip arrived that further electrified the atmosphere. The tip, delivered as a cryptic email signed "Hope's Keeper," stated, "The pain inflicted on the innocent bears the mark of deliberate cruelty. Follow the trail where shadows lie, and the truth will be unveiled." Attached to the email was a blurry photograph showing Spirit near a secluded section of the forest, a location where recent disturbances had been reported by local animal welfare volunteers. This chilling message validated Jack's worst fears and added urgency to his quest for answers. Concurrently, local media picked up the story with increasing intensity. Sensational headlines began to circulate: "Injured wolf's cry for help exposes dark secrets," and "Man's act of compassion unmasks human cruelty in the wild." Journalists interviewed wildlife experts, former employees of the implicated millionaire, and community members, each account adding layers of complexity to the narrative. The media coverage polarized public opinion even further, with passionate calls for accountability from some segments and skeptical caution from others. The scrutiny made it clear that Spirit's case had grown far beyond an isolated incident. It had become a symbol of broader systemic exploitation and neglect. Officer Ryan, who had initially assisted Jack in documenting the evidence, now emerged as a reluctant but determined ally in the fight for justice. His own transformation from a by-the-book enforcer to someone deeply moved by the suffering of a vulnerable creature added a personal dimension to the unfolding drama. In private conversations with Jack, Ryan admitted, "I never imagined I'd see the day when a wounded wolf would force me to question everything I thought I knew about this world. But every piece of evidence, every angry cry from the wild, tells me that we must act." The convergence of these diverse narratives, the impassioned community outcry, the rigorously documented evidence, the anonymous messages, and the media's relentless spotlight, created a pressure cooker of conflicting emotions and high stakes. The question that now loomed large was not merely about punishing an individual, but about exposing a network of neglect and exploitation that had allowed such cruelty to fester. The collective call for justice was growing louder, yet there remained a voice of caution, urging that the investigation be thorough and measured to ensure that no false accusations marred the pursuit of truth. In a final decisive moment at the community forum, as voices clashed and the room trembled with raw emotion, the assembled group faced a choice: to demand immediate punitive action against those responsible, or to invest in a comprehensive independent investigation that could uncover the full extent of the systemic abuse. This choice was more than administrative. It was a moral crossroads that would determine the community's future approach to justice, compassion, and the stewardship of nature. In that charged atmosphere, as dark clouds gathered and the first drops of rain began to fall outside, Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him. He knew that the next steps would not only shape the destiny of Spirit, but could also redefine the community's moral compass. The conflict between raw emotion and cold, measured investigation had reached its zenith, setting the stage for a final, decisive confrontation that would expose the dark underbelly of human cruelty and, hopefully, pave the way for healing. The storm that had been brewing for weeks finally broke, unleashing its fury upon the forest. Rain lashed against the trees, and the wind howled through the night, as if nature itself was bearing witness to the unfolding drama. Jack, Officer Ryan, and their allies gathered at the edge of the forest, near the clearing where all the evidence had first converged. The atmosphere was electric, heavy with the anticipation of what was to come. Every detail, from the precise claw marks on the soft soil to the torn, delicate pendant found nearby, had been meticulously documented. These clues, combined with the internal memos leaked by a former employee and the anonymous tips circulating through local networks, formed an unassailable case of human cruelty that had inflicted deep wounds on Spirit. As the assembled group stood in the damp clearing, the roar of the storm outside served as a grim counterpoint to the fervent determination inside. The community had long been divided between those who demanded immediate retribution against the millionaire responsible and those who insisted on a methodical, comprehensive investigation into the network of neglect and exploitation. Now, faced with the raw, indisputable evidence laid out before them, the division seemed to narrow into a single, powerful resolve: to expose and eradicate the cruelty that had been hidden beneath a veneer of wealth and public philanthropy. Jack stepped forward, his voice steady but resonant with urgency. "We are standing at the very edge of darkness," he declared, "and the only way forward is to shine a light on every hidden injustice. Spirit suffering is not an isolated incident, it is a cry for help that echoes across our entire community. We cannot ignore this any longer." His words, weighted with both personal loss and collective outrage, reverberated through the group, stirring even the most cautious among them. In that charged moment, Officer Ryan, who had transformed from a detached enforcer to a passionate advocate for the vulnerable, took a deep breath and added, "We must act now. The evidence we have gathered is overwhelming, and every minute we delay only allows this cycle of cruelty to continue. It's not just about holding one man accountable, it's about dismantling a system that treats life as disposable." His declaration cut through the murmur of dissent and fear, galvanizing the team to take the next step. The tension in the clearing was palpable. Rain hammered on the leaves overhead, as if nature itself was bearing witness to the proceedings. Every eye in the group was fixed on the document spread across a weathered wooden crate, every heart pounding with the knowledge that this moment would define their future. The community's task force, now a coalition of wildlife experts, investigative journalists, local activists, and former insiders, prepared to move forward with a coordinated operation. Their plan was both bold and multifaceted: launch a full-scale independent investigation to document the millionaire's history of exploitation, while simultaneously filing formal legal complaints to force accountability. As the group debated the final details, an unexpected gust of wind sent a chill down everyone's spine, a symbolic reminder, perhaps, that the forces of nature and justice were inextricably linked. In that moment, a senior member of the task force, a respected local lawyer named Mr. Ellis, spoke up. "This is our turning point," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "We have the evidence, we have the support of the community, and we have a duty to protect not only the wildlife but every vulnerable soul affected by this cruelty. We stand united, and together, we will see that justice is served." With Mr. Ellis's impassioned call resonating in the air, the group reached a critical consensus. They agreed to set a specific timeline for the independent investigation, to gather further testimonies from those who had been directly affected, and to mobilize legal support to ensure that the truth would not be buried beneath the weight of corporate power. The decision was met with a mix of relief and solemn determination, a collective acknowledgement that the battle against cruelty had just begun, but that they were now ready to face it head-on. As the meeting drew to a close, the storm outside began to subside, and a fragile, tentative calm replaced the earlier clamor. The task force members dispersed, each carrying with them the burden of responsibility and the hope of a community united against injustice. Jack lingered at the clearing a little longer, gazing at the rain-soaked earth that bore the marks of cruelty and resistance. In that silent, reflective moment, he felt the immense weight of the journey, a journey that had taken him from a solitary act of kindness to the forefront of a fight for justice that would determine the fate of an entire community. The peak tension of that night had set the stage for the final act, a decisive confrontation with the forces of exploitation, moment when the hidden truths would finally be brought into the light. The call for justice, echoing in every raindrop and every breath of the forest, promised that no cruelty would go unanswered. That night, as a heavy, turbulent storm battered the forest and darkness cloaked every shadow, everything converged into one electrifying, heart-pounding moment, a moment when the truth would finally burst forth. Jack, driven by a fierce determination and the raw emotions of his journey with spirit, led his small task force deep into the forest where all the evidence had pointed. The wind howled and rain lashed at them as they reached the site, a secluded clearing beneath an ancient, towering oak that seemed to pulse with silent authority. Under the relentless downpour, the clearing was illuminated only by the occasional flash of lightning. The ancient oak, its bark etched with mysterious, weathered symbols, stood as a sentinel to decades of secrets. At the center of the clearing lay fresh, deliberate claw marks etched into the soft earth, alongside scattered remnants of torn fabric and a discarded piece of a necklace, evidence that had been previously gathered and now displayed before the gathered group. Jack's heart pounded as he scanned the scene, each detail reinforcing the chilling possibility that Spirit's suffering had been no accident, but a calculated act of cruelty. In that fraught silence, Officer Ryan stepped forward, his voice steady yet charged with emotion. "We followed every clue," he said, his gaze sweeping over the determined faces of wildlife experts, community activists, and local law enforcement gathered there. Every mark, every torn piece, every footprint, all point to one undeniable truth: someone deliberately hurt Spirit. His words reverberated through the clearing, the storm's roar providing a somber counterpoint to his impassioned declaration. At that moment, a flash of lightning illuminated the forest, and in its brief glow, Jack noticed a figure emerging from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. The mysterious individual, clad in dark, weather-beaten clothing, moved silently toward the group. A palpable tension gripped everyone as the figure came into clearer view, a person whose presence confirmed the worst of Jack's suspicions. With deliberate, measured steps, the stranger approached and halted a few paces away, hands empty but eyes filled with a defiant resolve. The stranger's presence, combined with the overwhelming physical evidence, forced the gathered group into a final confrontation. The tension was so thick that even the ceaseless patter of rain seemed to fade into the background. Jack, stepping forward with a mix of courage and raw determination, demanded, "Who are you? What do you have to say for the cruelty inflicted on Spirit?" The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. For a long, agonizing moment, the stranger said nothing. Then, with a voice that was low and laden with regret, the figure finally spoke. I never meant for it to come to this," the stranger admitted, the words trembling on his lips. "I was part of something much larger, something I believed would help, but it went horribly wrong." The confession sent shockwaves through the group. The revelation that the deliberate harm to Spirit was not a random act, but part of a calculated, systemic abuse by individuals operating in the shadows, confirmed the worst of what Jack and his team had feared. As the stranger continued, he revealed that he had been involved with a clandestine operation sponsored by a powerful, wealthy figure whose public persona of philanthropy masked a ruthless, exploitative agenda. "We were told it was for the greater good," the stranger confessed, his eyes brimming with remorse. "But in reality, we were simply pawns in a game of profit and power. When I realized the extent of the cruelty we were inflicting on innocent creatures, I couldn't bear it anymore. I tried to warn them. I tried to stop it." His words spilled out in a torrent of regret and anguish, each sentence a bitter acknowledgement of a broken system. In that climactic moment, the full magnitude of the injustice crashed over everyone like a tidal wave. The wounded Spirit, who had once approached Jack in silent desperation, now lay nearby, a living testament to the cruelty of human greed. The stranger's confession, laced with vulnerability and remorse, confirmed that Spirit's injury was a deliberate act, designed to exploit the wild for profit, to send a message of dominance by those who believed they were above nature. Officer Ryan's eyes filled with tears as he absorbed the truth. The transformation in his own heart, from detachment to a fierce, protective empathy, found its ultimate purpose in this moment. "We will not let this continue," Ryan vowed, his voice echoing with conviction over the storm's din, not only for Spirit, but for every living being left to suffer in silence. His declaration was a rallying cry, a call to dismantle the network of exploitation that had brought such deliberate cruelty to the wilderness. With the stranger now in custody, the task force quickly secured all the evidence, and Jack led a team to document every detail of the clearing, photographing the claw marks, collecting remnants of torn fabric, and carefully recording the symbols on the ancient oak. The evidence, now overwhelming, formed the cornerstone of a new, resolute campaign for justice. In that final, breathtaking climax, as the storm began to subside and the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the community's collective resolve solidified. The confrontation had exposed not only the deep-seated cruelty that had wounded Spirit, but had also ignited a promise of retribution and systemic change. Jack, Officer Ryan, and their allies, with the solemn testimony of the remorseful stranger echoing in their ears, vowed to see that those responsible would be held accountable. The battle for justice was about to begin in earnest, a battle that would bring the hidden networks of exploitation into the unforgiving light of truth. As the first light of dawn broke over the misty forest, a fragile calm settled in the wake of the stormy night's revelations. The journey that began with an injured wolf's desperate plea for help had transformed into a powerful saga of resilience, accountability, and the unyielding strength of compassion. For Jack and Officer Ryan, what started as a solitary act of rescue evolved into a crusade against a deep-seated network of human cruelty, a network that had inflicted unspeakable suffering on Spirit, the wounded wolf who had come to symbolize the vulnerable in nature. In the quiet aftermath of the dramatic confrontation in the secluded clearing, the evidence against those responsible for Spirit's injuries lay undeniable. The deliberate claw marks, the torn pendant, and the precise footprints had all coalesced into a damning testament to exploitation and neglect. The remorseful confession of the shadowy figure, once part of a system driven by greed and power, had shaken the community to its core, exposing a hidden underbelly of human malice that had long lurked behind the polished facade of wealth and philanthropy. For the community, Spirit's case became a rallying cry, a symbol of hope that even the most wounded souls could be healed through acts of genuine kindness and collective action. At town hall meetings, impassioned speeches gave voice to both outrage and the desire for deep, systemic change. Local animal welfare groups, emboldened by the evidence and the stirring public debate, began pushing for reforms to ensure that no creature would ever again be treated as disposable. The once divided community slowly united under the common banner of compassion, determined to challenge the indifference that had allowed cruelty to flourish unchecked. Officer Ryan's transformation from a detached enforcer of the law to a steadfast guardian of the vulnerable had not only redefined his own path but had also inspired those around him. His heartfelt declaration, echoing through the storm-soaked clearing, was more than a promise to Spirit. It was a pledge to uphold justice for every living being silenced by neglect. In his eyes, the case of Spirit had become emblematic of a broader moral imperative, to dismantle systems that devalue life and to reaffirm that true strength lies in the capacity to care for others, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Jack, whose compassion had sparked this entire movement, now carried the weight of responsibility with quiet dignity. His careful documentation of every detail, from the deliberate claw marks to the torn pendant, had laid the groundwork for an investigation that promised to expose the full extent of the exploitation at hand. Every step he had taken in the forest, every sleepless night spent retracing clues, had led him to this moment of reckoning. The once isolated act of helping a wounded wolf had grown into a multifaceted campaign for justice, one that would hold the perpetrators accountable and restore hope in a community long scarred by indifference. In the weeks that followed, a task force was established, a coalition of wildlife experts, investigative journalists, community activists, and compassionate law enforcement officials. Their mandate was clear: to ensure that the dark networks of cruelty and exploitation were brought into the light, and that Spirit suffering would never again be ignored. The task force worked tirelessly, gathering further evidence, interviewing witnesses, and collaborating with local authorities to launch a comprehensive investigation. Their efforts served as a beacon, a reminder that when people come together, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. As the investigation gained momentum, local media shifted their narrative from sensationalism to a nuanced exploration of the transformative power of empathy. Editorials and feature stories celebrated not just the heroism of those who had rescued Spirit, but also the resilience of a creature who, despite its injuries, embodied the enduring will to survive. The collective outcry for justice became a movement that transcended individual cases and sparked broader discussions about the ethical responsibilities of those in positions of power. Now, as the community stands at the threshold of a promising future, the legacy of Spirit, the wounded wolf whose silent plea for help ignited a wave of change, remains a powerful testament to the strength of compassion. The journey of healing is ongoing, and the task force's investigation serves as a constant reminder that no act of cruelty can ever truly go unchallenged when people are united by empathy. The days following the dramatic confrontation in the forest clearing were marked by a sense of cautious optimism. The community, once fractured by differing opinions and skepticism, now stood united in their resolve to seek justice for Spirit and all the other creatures who had suffered in silence. The task force, bolstered by the overwhelming evidence in the stranger's confession, worked tirelessly to dismantle the network of exploitation that had caused so much pain. Spirit, the wounded wolf who had become the symbol of this movement, began to show remarkable signs of recovery. Under Jack's careful watch, the wolf's wounds healed, and its strength returned. The bond between man and beast grew stronger with each passing day, a testament to the power of compassion and trust. Jack often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them together, a journey that had started with a simple act of kindness and had grown into a fight for justice. As the investigation progressed, more details about the clandestine operation came to light. The wealthy figure behind the exploitation, once revered for his philanthropic endeavors, was revealed to be the mastermind of a cruel and profitable enterprise. The operation had targeted not only wolves but other vulnerable species, capturing and exploiting them for profit under the guise of conservation. The community was outraged, and the media coverage intensified, shining a harsh light on the dark underbelly of human greed. The task force, now a well-coordinated team of experts and activists, worked closely with law enforcement to bring the perpetrators to justice. Legal proceedings were initiated, and the evidence gathered by Jack and his allies played a crucial role in building a strong case. The courtroom became a battleground where the forces of justice and exploitation clashed, each side presenting their arguments with fervor and determination. Throughout the trial, Spirit's story remained at the forefront, a powerful reminder of the stakes involved. The wolf's journey from a wounded, desperate creature to a symbol of resilience and hope resonated deeply with everyone who followed the case. Jack, often called upon to testify, spoke passionately about the bond he had formed with Spirit and the importance of protecting the vulnerable in nature. As the trial reached its conclusion, the community held its breath, waiting for the verdict that would determine the fate of those responsible. The courtroom was packed with supporters, activists, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the culmination of this hard-fought battle for justice. When the verdict was finally announced, a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. The wealthy figure and his accomplices were found guilty on multiple counts of animal cruelty, exploitation, and environmental destruction. The judge's stern words echoed through the courtroom, condemning the actions of the defendants and emphasizing the importance of accountability and compassion. The victory was bittersweet, as it came at the cost of so much suffering. But for Jack and the community, it was a moment of triumph, a validation of their efforts and a step towards a more just and compassionate world. The legacy of Spirit's story would endure, inspiring future generations to stand up against cruelty and fight for the protection of all living beings. With the legal battle behind them, the community turned its attention to healing and rebuilding. The forest, once a place of hidden horrors, began to reclaim its natural beauty. The scars left by human cruelty slowly faded, replaced by the vibrant signs of life and renewal. Spirit, now fully recovered, roamed the wilderness with a newfound sense of freedom, a living testament to the resilience of nature. Jack, having played a pivotal role in the fight for justice, found himself at a crossroads. His journey with Spirit had changed him in ways he could never have imagined. The once solitary hiker had become a passionate advocate for wildlife protection, dedicating his life to ensuring that no creature would suffer as Spirit had. He worked closely with the task force, using his experience and knowledge to educate others and promote conservation efforts. Officer Ryan, too, had undergone a profound transformation. His initial skepticism had given way to a deep sense of empathy and commitment to the cause. He became a vocal supporter of animal welfare, using his position to advocate for stronger laws and better enforcement. The bond between Jack and Ryan, forged in the heat of battle, grew into a lasting friendship, united by their shared mission. The community, inspired by the events that had unfolded, embraced a new ethos of compassion and stewardship. Local schools incorporated wildlife conservation into their curricula, and community groups organized regular cleanup and reforestation efforts. The once divided town had found common ground, united by a shared commitment to protecting the natural world. As the years passed, Spirit's story became a legend, told and retold as a reminder of the power of compassion and the importance of standing up for what is right. The wolf, now a symbol of hope and resilience, continued to roam the forest, a living testament to the enduring bond between humans and nature. Jack often returned to the clearing where it had all begun, the place where he had first encountered the injured wolf. The ancient oak, its bark etched with the symbols of the past, stood as a silent witness to the journey that had transformed so many lives. In the quiet of the forest, Jack felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that their efforts had made a difference. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the trees, Jack reflected on the journey that had brought him here. It had been a path marked by pain, struggle, and sacrifice, but also by hope, resilience, and the unyielding strength of compassion. The story of Spirit and the fight for justice had left an indelible mark on his heart, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, there is always a glimmer of light. And so, as the forest whispered its secrets to the wind, Jack stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For he knew that as long as there were those willing to fight for what is right, the world would always have a chance to heal and thrive. Thank you for joining us on this deeply moving journey of transformation, justice, and hope. If Spirit's story and the inspiring actions of those who fought to heal his wounds have touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We invite you to reflect on the power of compassion to change lives and to help ensure that every voice, human or animal, is heard. Stay tuned for more stories that explore the profound connections between humanity and the natural world, and let's continue to champion kindness and accountability.